Welcome to lesson 4, where we will look at individualizing the macronutrient targets. Let's first look at protein. Protein intake happens to have a hierarchy of importance that is important to keep in mind because most people, they'll have a bunch of tactics and objectives floating around in their mind regarding protein intake. And a lot of times people miss the forest for the trees. So, in other words, they're focusing on the thin layer of icing on the cake and they're missing the cake altogether. So, starting with the cake, of first importance is total daily amount of protein. You will get the majority of your results from just hitting the daily total. Of distant secondary importance is the distribution of the constituent doses of this total through the day. And then of least importance is the timing of protein doses relative to the training bout. Now that third point, or the least in the hierarchy, goes counter to a lot of the legend and lore that circulates the fitness community and the sports nutrition community. But for the goal of maximizing muscle gain specifically, this is the hierarchy of importance: protein intake. All right, so let's talk about total daily protein requirements. For the general population, it's about 50 to 100% greater than the RDA. The RDA for protein was established over 40 years back. It's outdated. It's insufficient for most non-clinical and clinical purposes. It's 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And for the general population, for general health, 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight is appropriate per the weight of the evidence. Now, for the goal of muscle gain, in most physically active and athletic populations, we're looking at 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, or in imperial terms, 0.7 to 1.0 grams per pound of body weight. The question always comes up that shouldn't we be basing protein intake on lean body mass? Well, we could, and it is true that protein should be based on the degree of someone's lean body mass, not necessarily their fat mass. But it's not always a simple thing to accurately estimate somebody's lean body mass or accurately assess somebody's body composition in order to assess lean body mass. So a suitable workaround for that particular challenge is to just base protein intake on target body weight. It's also called goal body weight or ideal body weight. So when you base protein intake on target body weight, then you can look at that as a surrogate for basing protein on lean body mass, but just with a margin of safety there. So protein targets for lean athletic populations in sustained hypocaloric conditions, well, that has just a slightly higher upper end. And if we were to be pushing the envelope with contest prep, then we're looking at a significantly higher range of protein intakes, 2.7 to 3.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. And this is based on some great research by Andrew Chappell and colleagues, where they looked at successful drug-free elite level, national level bodybuilders and what they consumed, and specifically what those who placed in the top 5 consumed versus those who didn't place in the top 5. And it's a good set of data. It's observational, but as Jim Rohn once said, success leaves clues, and that is the data we've got. So the energy surplus and macronutrient considerations for maximizing muscle hypertrophy, we'll look at the big picture, aka the big rocks or the cake rather than the icing, which we'll get to in the next lesson. So first, we tailor the caloric surplus magnitude and composition to the individual's starting status and goal. So tailoring the magnitude of the surplus is really kind of a matter of, are they beginners or are they more intermediate and advanced? And most of the people you work with are going to be intermediates to some degree. And when you're setting the caloric surplus for the goal of maximizing muscle gains, you do have to be somewhat careful because it's not too tough to overprescribe the caloric surplus and enable somebody to gain an undue amount of body fat. So the way that we kind of tread somewhat carefully around that potential problem is setting the caloric surplus at about 10 to 20% above and beyond the maintenance needs for intermediate trainees and for advanced trainees as well. So the time that you may want to breach this 10 to 20% surplus benchmark is if somebody is a beginner and or if somebody is a hard gainer, in quotes. So hard gainers have this tendency to swallow up caloric surpluses that you try to impose on them, or rather nullify those surpluses because of a tendency to ramp up non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So their tendency to subconsciously ramp up spontaneous physical activity. And that, once again, could swallow up a significant energy surplus that you try to throw at them. Thus, those cases could possibly warrant surpluses that are higher than 20% above maintenance. Rate of total body weight gain should be limited to about 1 to 2% a month. And it should be recognized that muscle gain is an excruciatingly slow process. So while fat loss in some cases can be quite rapid, the idea of rapid muscle gain is really only limited to non-natties or people who are on anabolic/androgenic steroids, and in some cases where people are just rebounding from severe weight loss. But other than that, you're looking at a very slow process for muscle gain to the tune of 1/4 to 0.5% per week or 1 to 2% a month. And this is when you're looking at gains in total body weight. So optimal total daily protein for populations who want to maximize muscle growth, then the golden range is 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. And once again, we would use target body weight unless your current body weight is your target body weight. As far as carbohydrates go, based on observational data, and I'm saying this because this figure, 3 to 6 grams per kilogram of body weight as a carbohydrate target for maximizing muscle gain, that target is based on circumstantial bits and pieces of evidence. It's based on observational data. It's based on case studies of successful competitive drug-free bodybuilders. And so the minimum amount of carbohydrate to consume that could still maximize muscle gain, that amount has not been systematically investigated. So we have to rely on the observational data that we have. And as the evidence stands, it's roughly a minimum of 3 grams per kilogram of body weight, or 1.4-ish grams per pound of body weight. And the range being 3 to 6 grams per kilogram of body weight, possibly up to 8 grams per kilogram of body weight for some people running very high volumes, and or some hard gainers who would require the extra calories. And when you are trying to push calories for muscle gain, then carbs are a good means to do that. So dietary fat should be at least 20% of total calories. And the reason is because when you go very low fat, then you compromise hormone production. And testosterone, and optimizing those levels, can be conducive to maximizing rates of muscle gain. So if you compromise testosterone production, you can potentially compromise rates of muscle gain. And there is a repetition of studies comparing low versus moderate, high-ish fat intakes, so 25% versus 40% of the diet from fat, and the 25% of total calories from fat results in lower testosterone levels compared to the 40% of total calories from fat. So what we can glean from this set of studies, which have been replicated, is that you probably shouldn't go below 20% of total calories from fat if you want to if you don't want to compromise testosterone production. And this could be important for the goal of maximizing muscle gain. If we were to look at absolute amounts, then you're looking at a minimum of about a gram of fat per kilogram of body weight, or 0.4-ish grams per pound of body weight, when you're looking at a minimum amount of dietary fat to consume if the goal is to maximize muscle gain. And with that, we have looked at the cake, and then we're going to begin to look at the icing on the cake with the anabolic window in the next lesson. See you then.